promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar and 1 p.m. in Abuja. Good afternoon and welcome to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar and online at wadr.org. First, our top stories. Benin launches major overhaul of its legal system as President Wadr installs a new law reform commission.
The objective is to identify within the existing body of legislation provisions that may have become outdated because our customs and international agreements have evolved.
Senegal adopts first national language policy, paving way for greater use of indigenous languages in schools. Ghanaian government to launch consular fund for citizens facing emergencies abroad.
Effective consular protection often requires immediate financial resources to provide emergency travel assistance, such as temporary accommodation, medical assistance, or evacuation.
And the Gambia unveils a multi-million-dollar fund to expand vocational training and support youth entrepreneurship. Please stay tuned for details of the stories and more.
On the news, this is a more edit.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to all of our listeners across the sub-region and beyond. Let's begin in Benin, where President Wadr has inaugurated the Standing Committee of the National Commission for Legal Reform, a new body tasked with reviewing and modernizing the country's legal framework. The commission is expected to align Benin's laws with emerging economic, technological and social realities as the government pursues broader institutional reforms. Deborah will complete the story.
Beninese President Wadr has officially installed the members of the Standing Committee of the National Commission for Legal Reform during a ceremony held in Cotonou. The commission has been tasked with reviewing existing legislation, identifying outdated laws, supporting the drafting of new legal texts, and ensuring the effective implementation of regional community law. Speaking at the ceremony, President Wadr said Benin's legal system must evolve to respond to emerging challenges.
Il s'agit d'identifier. The objective is to identify within the existing body of legislation provisions that may have become outdated because our customs, practices and international agreements we have signed have evolved. In short, as the world changes, certain provisions that were relevant yesterday may no longer be relevant today. A few years ago, many of today's challenges simply did not exist. As a result, our current legal framework is often completely silent on these emerging issues affecting our society. The Commission's role is also to identify these legal gaps and make proposals on how they should be addressed.
The president also called for an inclusive reform process involving legal experts, academics, civil society, and professional organizations, pledging the resources needed for the commission to carry out its work. The initiative forms part of Benin's wider governance reforms aimed at strengthening public institutions and creating a legal framework better suited to the country's long-term economic and social development.
That was Deborah with that report. Still in Benin, the Republican police are cracking down on roadside extortion by officers. The decision announced by the Director General of the Republican Police is against the backdrop of increasing reports of corruption. Authorities have therefore dedicated 5 hotlines for citizens to report incidents of extortion and misconduct. Veronica Njaya reports.
Authorities in Benin have launched a crackdown on illegal payments demanded from road users by some security officers as part of efforts to fight against roadside extortion. The Director General of the Republican Police, Brice Alowanu, is urging motorists to systematically report officers involved in bribery and extortion, practices that cost the state billions of CFA francs every year.
Zero tolerance for corruption and extortion in all its forms. Any officer caught in the act of extorting citizens will face sanctions. The officer will be subject to disciplinary proceedings that could lead to dismissal from service without prejudice to possible criminal proceedings.
The police chief warns that officers caught in the act of corruption or extortion will face severe disciplinary measures, including dismissal from service, as well as possible criminal prosecution. Superiors of officers involved could also face sanctions if repeated cases are recorded within their units.
In the eyes of the public, every police officer represents state authority. This responsibility requires absolute integrity, professionalism, and exemplary discipline.
Despite the removal of several fixed checkpoints and the introduction of body cameras and speed radars, cases of illegal roadside payments continue to be reported on some routes. The latest move, therefore, builds on ongoing reforms to clean up checkpoints across Benin.
Our correspondent in Cotonou, Aziz Adam Sule, filed in that report and voiced by Veronique Njai. Now let's take a closer look at Senegalese President Bassirou Faye's visit to Mali. The Tuesday's trip represented the president's first travel since taking over as chairperson of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government. The visit focused on strengthening security, economic, and diplomatic cooperation between Dakar and Bamako. But in all, what does this engagement mean for relations between Mali, Senegal, and the wider West African region? Chris Vatisho tells us more.
Senegal and Mali already collaborate through intelligence sharing and joint military patrols as the threat of terrorism continues to affect border communities and regional stability. Security challenges are also disrupting trade between Dakar and Bamako. Mali remains a major user of the port of Dakar, but the Bamako-Dakar corridor has come under pressure from armed groups affecting the movement of goods and passengers. On the diplomatic front, Senegal continues to support Mali in international forums, with some Malian concerns being raised by Dakar with global partners. During his visit, Senegalese President and ECOWAS chairperson Bassirou Faye also carried a message from the bloc, focusing on renewed engagement with the Alliance of Sahel State AES. The regional powerhouse says it wants to preserve key achievements, including the free movement of people and goods from across West Africa. Discussions also touched on the planned transition from the CFA francs to the eco currency in 2027, as outlined in the regional monetary agenda. Although Mali has withdrawn from the ECOWAS, it remains a member of the West African Economic and Monetary Union, UEMOA. President Faye is also pushing for a UEMOA MOVS summit to strengthen economic cooperation and improve joint management of the Senegal River.
Chris Faticho with that analysis on President Bassirou Faye's visit to Mali.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
The Senegalese government has taken a major step towards integrating national languages into its education system with the validation of its first national language policy document. The framework is expected to guide future language policy, promoting the use of indigenous languages in teaching while preserving the country's cultural heritage. Sankli Janko reports.
Senegal has validated its first national language policy document, a strategic framework designed to strengthen the role of national languages in education, knowledge transmission, and cultural preservation. The document was reviewed during a technical validation workshop in Dakar, chaired by the Minister of National Education, Mustafa Mamba Gracie, bringing together linguists, researchers, education experts, civil society representatives, and development partners. Authorities say the policy aims to improve learning by allowing children to begin their education in the language they understand best before gradually introducing other languages, including French. Officials believe this approach will promote inclusion, improve learning outcomes, and better reflect Senegal's linguistic diversity. The initiative forms part of a broader education reforms under the government's Senegal 2050 vision, which seeks to build a more inclusive and competitive education system while recognizing national languages as an important pillar of identity, innovation, and national development.
Sankle Jango filed that report. Crossing over to the Gambia now, President Adama Barrow has launched an over $1.1 million skills innovation and entrepreneurship fund to expand vocational training and youth-led businesses. The program will support upgrades in 25 technical and vocational institutions, while 18 partner institutions will receive funding for skills development programs. It will also provide support to 75 youth startups annually, linking practical training with job creation and entrepreneurship opportunities. From Banjul, Rosa Marakates reports.
Backed by the World Bank through the Resilience, Inclusive Skills and Equity RISE project, the funding includes $33.8 million for 25 technical and vocational institutions to upgrade workshops, provide facilities, and enhance the quality of training. Another $49.9 million will provide scholarships and stipends for more than 1,300 young people, with the focus on sectors such as agriculture, information technology, engineering, tourism, and the creative industry. Launching the $83.8 million initiative, President Adama Barrow said the investment underscores his government's commitment to equipping young Gambians with practical skills for employment and entrepreneurship.
The employability and job creation indication of those beneficiaries are positive. I am encouraged by the broad interest this initiative has generated across the TVEC ecosystem in the country.
World Bank Residence Representative Franklin Mutahana described the initiative as a major investment in human capital, saying strong vocational training is key to creating jobs and building long-term economic resilience.
The real question is not only how many participants completed training, but whether that training was relevant, of sufficient quality, and whether it helped young people move into employment or self-employment.
Beneficiary students welcome the support, noting that earlier beneficiaries achieved an 84% employment rate, while the program helped reduce the financial burden on many Gambian families. For WADR, Rose Samarakites, Banjo.
Crossing over to Ghana, the government is set to establish a consular fund to provide urgent support for citizens facing emergencies abroad. Foreign Affairs Minister Samuel Okudzeto-Blackwell says the initiative will strengthen existing consular services and ensure faster assistance for Ghanaians in distress overseas. The fund, which will rely on public and private sector collaboration, is part of government's effort to improve the protection and welfare of Ghanaians traveling or living outside the country. Take a listen.
The scale of humanitarian interventions undertaken since the beginning of 2025 has reinforced the need for a sustainable financing mechanism to support Ghanaian nationals facing genuine emergencies abroad. These interventions demonstrate that effective consular protection often requires immediate financial resources to provide emergency travel assistance, such as temporary accommodation, medical assistance, welfare support, and, where necessary, repatriation or evacuation. It is against this background that we will soon be launching a public-private partnership for the Consular Fund to be established. This Consular Fund will strengthen the ministry's capacity to provide the necessary timely assistance to Ghanaian nationals confronted with genuine emergencies abroad. The Consular Fund will complement existing consular services by enabling the ministry and Ghana's diplomatic missions to respond more rapidly to exceptional humanitarian situations while ensuring that assistance is provided transparently.
Samuel Okudzeto-Blackwell is Ghana's Foreign Affairs Minister. You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM in Dakar and around the world on WADR.org. Here is a reminder of the top stories. Benin launches major overhaul of its legal system as President Wadani installs a new law reform commission. Senegal adopts a first national language policy paving way for greater use of indigenous languages in schools. Ghanaian government to launch consular fund for citizens facing emergencies abroad. And the Gambia unveils a multi-million-dollar fund to expand vocational training and support youth entrepreneurship. Still ahead, we do have a guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Connecting Ghana to West Africa. This is Nadidi Tete in Accra, and you're listening to WADR 94.9 FM, Dakar.
Don't forget, we are streaming live on wadr.org and also follow live streamings on YouTube and Facebook at WADR English. Now let's bring you some health news. The Liberian government has kicked off a nationwide hepatitis B vaccination campaign in order to eliminate the viral disease as a public health threat. The campaign is expected to improve access to vaccination, encourage early testing and treatment, as well as strengthen the country's response to one of the leading causes of liver disease. The campaign was launched on Tuesday to mark World Hepatitis Day observed this year under the global theme Hepatitis, Let's Break It Down, and Liberia's national slogan, Take Action. WDR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
The initiative led by the Ministry of Health to do the National AIDS and STI Control Program seeks to boost popular awareness, expand testing, and improve access to treatment. Program Manager Dr. Jonathan Flomo warned that thousands of people are at risk if infections are not detected and treated.
Hepatitis B is spread through unprotected sexual intercourse, through drug use by using one needle, through blood transfusion. We need to take action. We need to prevent ourselves.
For the Assistant Minister for Vital Statistics at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Anthony Fortune, World Hepatitis Day provides an opportunity for country to reaffirm its commitment to eliminating viral disease as a public health threat. Organizers have urged Liberians to get screened, stressing that early diagnosis is key to preventing transmission and ensuring timely treatment, as Liberia's surveillance system does not yet provide a complete nationwide count on infections. A recent WHO-supported report on Liberia found notable hepatitis B prevalence, including 34% among men, 25% among uniformed service personnel, and 20.1% among female sex workers. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
As the rainy season intensifies across Nigeria, concerns are mounting over an increasing number of building collapses. Several people have been killed in recent incidents in Rivers, Lagos, Kano, Ogun, and Anambra states. The recurring disasters have once again raised questions about the safety of buildings, compliance with construction standards, and the effectiveness of regulatory oversight. Correspondent H.N.S. Hasecha reports.
The latest incidents have left families grieving and communities counting their losses. In Port Harcourt, Rivers State, at least 3 people died after a multi-story building under construction collapsed. In Lagos, another building collapse resulted in multiple fatalities, while Kano recorded the collapse of a 2-story structure that claimed 1 life and left others injured. The latest incidents occurred in Ogun and Anambra states. In Ogun State, a 3-story building sank into the ground after a heavy downpour and thunderstorm. 3 people were confirmed dead, while 12 others, including 2 newborn babies, were rescued by emergency responders.
We're at our shop, in front of our shop, discussing, me and my neighbor. All of a sudden, we just hear, wow, everywhere was white, so we ran. When we were running away, one boy was now shouting that our mom is inside the house, our mom is inside the house.
Ogun State Commissioner for Works and Infrastructure, Ade Akinsanya, says the government has commenced structural assessments in the area.
The main thing is we need to protect life, do what we can do to assure everything is okay. I've said, luckily we're able to recover some people alive, and unfortunately, with their soul rest in peace, we have 3 dead bodies.
In Anambra State, although heavy rainfall is often associated with such incidents, experts say the weather is rarely the primary cause. Instead, they point to structural defects, poor workmanship, weak regulatory enforcement, disregard for approved building plans, and the use of substandard construction materials. Urban planners are also urging state governments to strengthen development control, ensure only qualified professionals supervise construction projects, and sanction developers who violate building regulations. For WADR, Yecheni Sasetu in Abuja.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
As ECOWAS prepares to host its first West Africa Water Forum, the International Committee of the Red Cross is calling for greater protection of water resources in conflict zones. The ICRC warns that attacks on water infrastructure and the use of water as a weapon are worsening humanitarian crisis, particularly across the Sahel, leaving millions without reliable access to safe water. Ahead of the September forum in Abidjan, WDR spoke to Eleanor Asomani, the ICRC's regional spokesperson, about why protecting water must become a regional priority.
People living specifically in conflict zones or surrounded by armed violence are particularly vulnerable to water scarcity. Indeed, we've seen water supplies and essential infrastructures providing water being targeted. And this is when we do have to be alarmed at the fact that sometimes water is used as a war weapon. But we also see water or water infrastructures being collateral damage during conflict. And the result of that is, of course, that water is life. And so that without any water, for instance, you are going to be at the risk of illnesses such as cholera. Hospitals are not going to be functioning anymore if you don't have clean water. You cannot be cleaning wounds properly. But also you have higher risks for women and girls, since they are the ones who usually go and fetch water. They have to go further away and they're exposed to violence. And finally, there's the risk linked to agriculture. So if there's no water, nothing can grow, which means that there's no food.
That said, what is the water situation like, or the water crisis like, in the Sahel?
It's true that in the Sahel, we have the particular situation that it is basically a vicious circle. Water, or the lack of, is a source of conflict, but also the consequences of armed conflict or armed violence. For example, prolonged droughts reduces access to water. So when you have very little rain or on a very short period of time in the year, that means that livestock or cattle owner have to look for water and for grass elsewhere, which also means that they might stumble upon the land that is not theirs, and this would make them potentially compete with other cattle owners. So that really, really is a problem because it can provoke tension, so conflicts, but also armed violence displaces people, and it displaces them in places where they may not have access to water, to clean water, or to places where that same conflict has already damaged or made obsolete the water infrastructures.
What concrete outcomes does the ICRC expect?
The ICRC is really hoping for innovative, flexible and multi-year financing that would allow us to provide specifically in conflict zones. And that doesn't always come as an emergency. It also comes as prevention, so preventing the collapse of those water systems to make sure that the gap between the needs and that aid is not as big. The second thing maybe could be to formally recognize that actually armed violence and armed conflict are a major obstacle to that access to water and integrate that water and conflict dimension to the conclusion of that conference, because we need to remember that targeting water systems, water infrastructures is actually prohibited by international humanitarian law.
Now, how can diplomatic commitments be translated into real protection for civilians on the ground?
So we have actors that are on the ground and that have the ability to help in those situations. So the International Committee of the Red Cross has, for instance, a unit that is in charge of assisting people who don't have access of water. For instance, in 2025, we've assisted 32 million people worldwide. So it is possible, and that is translated in the distribution of emergency water, the rehabilitation of water, sanitation, and energy infrastructures, and always working hand in hand with local authorities. Earlier, we mentioned the Sahel in Mali in 2025. More than 160,000 people were able to access clean water thanks to infrastructures that were either constructed or rehabilitated by the International Committee of the Red Cross, and always in support of local authorities.
Eleanor Asomani is regional spokesperson for the International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC. And in sport news, the Confederation of African Football CAF has announced the latest Woman of the Match award winners at the 2026 Women's Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco, recognizing the standout performers from the opening 6 matches of the tournament. Malawi's Temwa Chawinga claimed the award after scoring twice to inspire her side to a historic 3-2 victory over defending champions Nigeria, one of the biggest upsets of the competition so far. Zambia captain Barbara Banda was also honored after producing a remarkable performance in her team's 6-0 victory over Egypt, scoring 4 goals to underline her status as one of Africa's top players. Earlier awards went to Ines Konan of Cote d'Ivoire for leading her side's 1-4 win over Burkina Faso, and Tanzania's Diana Msewa after helping her team defeat South Africa 2-1. On the opening day of the tournament, Morocco's Hanan Eid El Hajj and Algeria's Melissa Bethi were recognized for their performances and victories over Kenya and Senegal, respectively. The Women's Africa Cup of Nations continues today with the opening Group D fixtures as Ghana takes on Cabo Verde, while Cameroon faces Mali, with all 4 teams looking to make a strong start to their campaigns. Meanwhile, Tunisia has appointed Moine Chabani as the new head coach of the national football team, replacing French coach Hervé Renard. The Tunisian Football Federation said Chabani has signed a 4-year contract that will keep him in charge of the Carthage Eagles until 2030. The 45-year-old arrives after a successful coaching career that includes back-to-back CAF Champions League titles with Esperance de Tunis and a recent spell with Moroccan side RS Berkane. The federation says his appointment is part of efforts to rebuild the national team ahead of future international competitions. And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Ismail Kamara and Maudoji for the technical support. Let's keep the conversation coming on all of our social media platforms of X, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook at WADR English. Do join Sibu Wedrago at the top of the hour for news in French and for Shifu. I am Imo Edet. Good afternoon.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.